I'm Susan McGinnis in the Energy News Center. Imagine driving a car so smart and eco-savvy you'd never have to worry about pollution, congestion, or car crashes. Well, that's what the authors of a new book entitled Reinventing the Automobile have envisioned for the car of the future. The book explains how the design of the car and everything associated with it needs to be rethought to make personal transportation cleaner, safer, and more efficient. With us now by phone from the GM Technical Center in Warren, Michigan is one of the authors of the book, Christopher Borroni-Bird. He is Director of Advanced Technology Vehicle Concepts at General Motors. Christopher, thanks for being with us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks, Susan.
Tell us now, when we talk about just how smart these possible cars of the future are, when you say they're eco-friendly, what exactly do you have in mind that's making them cleaner?
Well, when we thought about the future of mobility, especially in urban areas, we tried to understand what are the problems we're trying to solve here. And there's several. One is the energy consumption and the environmental emissions. Another is a set of the safety and the accidents, both with other vehicles and with pedestrians and cyclists. And then there's congestion, and then there's finding parking and just the amount of parking space in a city. And then there's affordability. So we were looking at what is a solution that would address all 6 of these challenges. And we came upon basically a 3-legged stool. It's small vehicles that are electric powered and are networked together. So if you think of today's car as being like a desktop PC from the 1980s, what we're thinking about for the future is much more like a small networked handheld PDA. It's still a computer, but it's much smaller, and importantly it's networked together, because we can't solve a lot of the mobility challenges facing big cities in the future if we just think about the vehicle by itself being clean. Because even if it's a zero emissions vehicle running on renewable energy, if it's stuck in traffic and you can't find somewhere to park, you're probably not going to buy the vehicle.
Are you talking about a vehicle that is emissions free and running on renewable energy?
Yes, we're looking at a small vehicle that is battery powered and propelled with electric motors. And obviously we'd like that electric power to come from renewable sources, but obviously it could come from other sources as well. But the vehicle itself would not only be very clean, it would be very efficient, because it would be a very lightweight vehicle. This would be putting a battery in a vehicle that may weigh less than 1,000 pounds. And just for reference, you know, your typical mid-sized sedan today may weigh between 3,000 and 4,000 pounds. So a vehicle that is probably 3 or 4 times lighter and takes up about 3 or 4 times less space when parked than a conventional car.
So the recharging would come from the grid, which right now is more than 50% comes from coal. So you're talking about the future of a grid that is powered exclusively with renewable energy?
Yes, but I would point out that even if we get the electricity from coal, if we're using this electricity extremely efficiently in a very small, lightweight vehicle, it's still going to be a benefit in terms of CO2. But obviously we'd like to use cleaner fuels.
Right, especially if you're talking emissions free. Because your book says that these smart cars can become a reality soon. How soon are you talking?
Well, we've demonstrated General Motors vehicles that can communicate with each other wirelessly. There's a dedicated spectrum that the FDC has allocated for safety-critical communications. It's 5.9 gigahertz, and we believe that this frequency, if vehicles can communicate with each other wirelessly, which can be done technically, we've demonstrated this, we can avoid a lot of collisions. But we're also putting some sensors around the vehicle as well, sensors that can avoid each other as well. So we're trying to make sure that the solution we have is not just dependent on vehicles that can communicate with each other, but also can sense each other. And the analogy I draw is with people. If you imagine people at an intersection, how is it that we manage to avoid collisions with other people when we're walking across a busy intersection?
So how soon do you see these on American roads, if all the stars are aligned correctly?
Yeah. Well, I would really think that the strongest or the most likely place for these vehicles to be attractive is really in some of the emerging megacities in Asia, or maybe even in European cities rather than American cities. I think in European cities there's a culture of driving small vehicles and bicycles, and I think in Asian cities that's also true as well, and they have tremendous population density. So I don't think American cities are necessarily the first place that would adopt these vehicles. I'm thinking more places like Shanghai or Mumbai or London as being more logical, and you know, in principle it could happen within a decade.
Okay. Now you're talking about everything associated with the automobile being radically rethought. Tell us about your thought that the current system is at a breaking point.
Well, today's vehicles are basically Swiss Army knives. They're really designed to take lots of people long distances at highway speeds. So they really were designed for traveling in between cities. So they can accommodate 5 people, they can go 100 miles an hour, and they can travel 300 miles, roughly. But in a big city like Manhattan or in Shanghai, these benefits pose a challenge. And if you think about the number of vehicles on the roads in those cities, and if they all are taking up about 10 square meters when parked, and they're parked 90% of the time, and they're consuming a lot of energy, and they pose a risk to pedestrians and cyclists, it's really not the optimal solution. So what we're proposing is a finely tuned solution for dense cities. We're not saying that the car is a dinosaur. The car is still going to be used, but primarily for dense urban cities, we think a better solution is a really small electric networked vehicle.
Which would mean no more internal combustion engine. I mean, what if the internal combustion engine, which isn't going anywhere soon, is fueled with other alternative, cleaner forms of energy?
Yes, that would also be a possibility, but the advantage of the electric vehicle is that it could provide tremendous design freedom and maneuverability. If you have an electric skateboard where everything is packaged underneath the vehicle, now you can make the vehicle a lot more small than a conventional vehicle that has an internal combustion engine at the front of the vehicle. So the vehicle can be smaller, it can be more maneuverable, and it can be a lot cleaner. And city pollution is still an issue in many cities, like in Beijing. The air pollution is really a problem. So even though you could do this with small internal combustion engine vehicles, I think ideally you'd like to use small electric vehicles. And if the vehicles only have to go about 30 miles between recharging, because the typical driving distances during the day is less than 30 miles, then battery-powered vehicles can be a lot cheaper than internal combustion engine vehicles.
So is all this what you mean by the new automotive DNA for these vehicles?
Yes. A lot of people think that electric cars are expensive, and that's true if you design them to go highway speeds and distances of 100 miles or more. But think about the electric bikes. There's over 100 million electric bikes in China. The population dwarfs that of cars, and they are electric vehicles. They travel about 25 miles a day, and they can go about 25 miles an hour. And we're taking that idea and basically making a vehicle out of it that provides more safety, more protection, more privacy, more comfort and convenience, and being able to drive, with another person next to you.
So are these specific ideas that you're offering, are there automakers or national labs working on these particular features, these cars of the future, the Nissan Leaf, the Tesla, the Mitsubishi, and others?
Yes, there's lots of companies working on electric vehicles. What we're proposing in this book is a vehicle probably different than those type of vehicles, even though it's electric powered. We're probably talking about something that's quite significantly smaller in dimensions, especially when parked, which is the issue where space is important. And critically, we're also thinking about networking between the vehicles. Again, the analogy with handhelds that can communicate with each other versus a desktop PC.
Right. Okay.
We're talking about a mobility internet here, and we can't solve congestion just by making the vehicle cleaner. So even if you have a ton of electric cars on the road, you're not going to solve congestion that way. You're going to have to solve it by allowing the vehicles to communicate with each other to avoid accidents, being able to communicate with the infrastructures to find parking more easily. About a third of fuel used in urban areas, in dense urban areas, is used looking for parking. So if you can find parking more easily, you can reduce congestion, you can reduce energy consumption. If you can reduce accidents, you can reduce congestion.
Right, you make a lot of people happy with that. The book is Reinventing the Automobile, co-author Christopher Borroni-Bird of GM. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We appreciate your insight. And I'm Susan McGinnis. You're watching Clean Skies News.